Jae-Sung Kim's lips were turning blue, his fingers clawing at his throat as his body convulsed against the leather chair in his private office. The scent of shellfish lingered in the air. Someone had ignored his allergy. His security team stood frozen at the doorway, their faces pale with terror, knowing that hesitation meant death for them all. "Call an ambulance." Mrs. Kim's shrill voice pierced through the chaos, her diamond-laden fingers trembling as she clutched her phone. "Don't just stand there, you useless—" But Madison, Washington, the housemaid everyone overlooked, was already moving. Her hands were steady as she pulled the EpiPen from her apron pocket, the one she'd kept hidden for 6 months, the one no one knew she carried. The room held its breath as she dropped to her knees beside the most dangerous man in Los Angeles's Korean underground. Madison's heart slammed against her ribs like a caged animal. She'd seen this before. The blue lips, the clawing desperation, the body shutting down while everyone watched. 7 years ago, in a grocery store parking lot, her mother had died exactly like this, while strangers filmed on their phones instead of helping. Madison had been 21, helpless, screaming for someone to do something. No one had. Her mother's lips had turned the same shade of blue, her fingers clawing at air just like Jae-Sung Kim's were doing now. Never again. Madison had sworn it that day. She'd carried an EpiPen every single day since, even when it meant skipping meals to afford the prescription refills, even when her landlord was threatening eviction and every dollar mattered. "What the hell are you doing?" Soo-jin's voice cut through the chaos like broken glass. "Get away from him! Security! Stop her! She poisoned him!" Madison didn't flinch. Her hands moved with practiced certainty, yanking the blue cap off the EpiPen with her teeth. She positioned the orange tip against Jae-Sung's outer thigh, pressing down hard through the expensive fabric of his suit. The spring-loaded mechanism fired with a sharp click that cut through the panicked breathing and shouted orders. She held it there, counting in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Her free hand pressed against his chest, feeling the erratic hammering of his heart beneath her palm. His body was burning hot through the white dress shirt, muscles locked tight with the allergic reaction. "Breathe," she whispered, her voice steady, even as her own lungs felt too small. "Come on, just breathe." For 3 eternal seconds, nothing happened. The office held its breath. Then Jae-Sung's chest heaved, dragging air into his lungs with a sound like tearing fabric. His eyes, dark, sharp, dangerous, flew open and locked onto hers. Madison felt the impact of that gaze like a physical blow. Recognition flickered there. Understanding. Something else she couldn't name but felt in her bones. His hand shot up and wrapped around her wrist, not violently, not weakly, but with absolute certainty, like he was anchoring himself to her, like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to kill him. "You." The word came out rough, barely more than a rasp, but it carried the weight of a man who was used to being obeyed. "You saved me." His thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist, finding her pulse where it hammered traitorously fast. The touch was intimate in a way that made heat crawl up her neck. She was a maid. He was Jae-Sung Kim, the man whose name made grown men cross the street, whose empire stretched from Koreatown to the docks, built on violence and power she didn't want to understand. And he was touching her like she mattered. This was dangerous. This was more dangerous than the poison that had just tried to kill him. "Ambulance is 6 minutes out," someone shouted from the doorway. Min-ho Park, Jae-Sung's cousin and second-in-command, stood there with a phone pressed to his ear, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked to Madison, cold and assessing, like he was calculating exactly what kind of problem she represented. "She did this." Soo-jin's voice climbed higher, hysteria bleeding through her carefully maintained composure. "She's been here 6 months. 6 months, watching, learning, planning. And now, conveniently, she has the exact medicine needed. She poisoned him and played hero. Madison tried to pull her hand back, but Jae-Sung's grip tightened. His breathing was evening out, color returning to his face in uneven patches, but he didn't let go, didn't look away from her. "No one," Jae-Sung said, his voice gaining strength with each word, "touches her." The command cut through the chaos like a blade. The security guards who'd been moving toward Madison froze mid-step. Soo-jin's mouth snapped shut, her perfectly made-up face twisting with something uglier than panic. Min-ho's expression didn't change, but Madison saw his jaw tighten. "She stays with me until the paramedics arrive," Jae-Sung continued, his eyes still locked on Madison's. "Anyone who has a problem with that can explain themselves to me later." The threat in those words was quieter than his wife's hysteria, but infinitely more terrifying. Madison felt it in the way every person in that room went still, felt it in the sudden weight of attention focused on her. She'd spent 6 months being invisible in this house, and now she was the center of a storm she didn't understand. "I need to know," Jae-Sung said, his voice dropping lower, meant only for her. "How did you know what to do?" Madison swallowed hard. His hand was still on her wrist, his thumb still moving in small circles against her pulse point. The touch was doing things to her nervous system that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the man himself. "My mother," she managed. "She died from anaphylaxis 7 years ago, in a parking lot. No one helped." The words came out flat, factual, but they carved through her chest like they always did. "I swore I'd never let it happen again, so I carry an EpiPen, just in case." Something shifted in his expression. Pain, maybe. Recognition of loss that matched her own. His fingers loosened slightly on her wrist but didn't release. "What's your name?" It was a ridiculous question. He'd signed her paychecks for 26 weeks. But Madison understood what he was really asking. He was asking who she was, not what she did. "Madison, Washington," she said. "Sir." "Madison." He said it slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of it, like it mattered. Then the paramedics burst through the door with equipment and urgent voices, and the moment shattered. The next 20 minutes blurred into chaos. EMTs swarming with oxygen masks and blood pressure cuffs. Questions fired in rapid succession, Jae-Sung being loaded onto a stretcher. Soo-jin climbing into the ambulance with theatrical concern, shooting Madison a look of pure venom before the doors closed. Min-ho organizing security, his phone pressed to his ear, giving orders in clipped Korean. And Madison, standing in the corner of that massive office with her hands shaking and the empty EpiPen still clutched in her palm, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd saved a man's life. That should have felt good, should have felt right. Instead, it felt like she'd just stepped off a cliff, and the ground was still rushing up to meet her. "You can go," Min-ho said, appearing beside her with the silent grace of a predator. "But don't leave the estate. Mr. Kim will want to speak with you when he returns." Madison nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked out of that office on legs that felt disconnected from her body, past security guards who now looked at her with something between suspicion and curiosity, past the other staff members who whispered in corners and fell silent when she passed. She made it to the East Wing bathroom before her knees gave out. Madison pressed her back against the cool marble wall and slid down, gulping air, trying to stop the trembling that had taken over her entire body. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving her cold and shaky and acutely aware of what she'd just done. She'd put her hands on Jae-Sung Kim, in front of his wife, in front of his security, in front of everyone. She'd made herself visible in a world where visibility meant danger. Madison pulled her phone from her apron pocket with trembling fingers. One text from Rosa, the older housekeeper who'd vouched for her 6 months ago. "Mija, what happened? Everyone's talking. Are you okay?" 3 missed calls from her babysitter. Panic spiked through her chest before she saw the follow-up text. "Elijah's fine. Just wanted to check on you. Saw the ambulance." Elijah, Her 5-year-old son, who was the entire reason she took this job, who needed follow-up treatments she couldn't afford, who drew pictures of superheroes and dreamed about being strong enough to protect his mom. If she lost this job, she lost everything. The rent was due in 4 days. She had $127 in her bank account. The hospital was sending payment reminder letters every week. She couldn't afford to be fired. She couldn't afford to be visible. But she also couldn't have watched Jae-Sung Kim die. Madison forced herself to stand, forced her spine straight and her hands steady. She had 4 more hours left in her shift. She would finish them. She would be invisible again. She would survive this like she'd survived everything else. 3 hours later, Madison was scrubbing the marble floors of the second-floor hallway when Rosa found her. The older woman's face was creased with worry, her graying hair escaping its usually perfect bun. "Mija," Rosa whispered, kneeling beside her even though her knees protested. "What were you thinking?" "He was dying, Rosa." I know. Rosa's weathered hands twisted in her apron. "But Soo Jin is telling everyone you poisoned him. She's saying you planted the EpiPen as cover. She's saying—" Rosa's voice dropped even lower. "She's saying you've been trying to seduce Mr. Kim for months, that this was your plan to get close to him." Madison's stomach dropped. The scrub brush fell from her numb fingers, clattering against marble. That's insane. Insane or not, she's his wife. She has power. Rosa's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "And you're— Mija, you know how she looks at you, how she treats you." This gave her ammunition. Madison did know. 6 months of being called that girl instead of her name. 6 months of redoing perfectly clean rooms because Soo Jin found imaginary dust. 6 months of comments about people like you and knowing your place, and questions about whether Madison washed her hands properly. 6 months of being reminded that she was black in a house that saw her as less than human. "Mr. Kim defended you," Rosa continued, "in front of everyone, told them not to touch you. That means something. That means I'm in more danger." Madison picked up the brush with shaking hands. "His wife hates me. His security doesn't trust me, and now I'm on everyone's radar." "Maybe," Rosa squeezed her shoulder, "or maybe you just became untouchable." Madison wanted to believe that. But she'd learned young that protection was temporary, and power was fickle, and women like her didn't get fairy tale endings. She finished her shift in mechanical silence, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, polishing surfaces that already gleamed. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind quiet. At 6 p.m., as she was gathering her things from the staff locker room, one of the security guards appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Kim is back. He wants to see you." Jae-Sung sat in the back of his armored town car, watching the Los Angeles winter twilight paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, and thought about the woman who'd saved his life. Madison Washington, 28 years old, single mother, 3 jobs, medical debt that would crush most people, clean background check except for 1 arrest 5 years ago, domestic violence victim defending herself, charges dropped. He'd known all of this for months, had known it since the day Rosa brought her in with quiet confidence, saying, "This one's different, Mr. Kim. This one you can trust." What the background check hadn't told him was that Madison Washington had hands steady enough to save a dying man while everyone else panicked, that she carried an EpiPen because trauma had taught her to be prepared, that she had eyes that refused to look away even when terror said she should. Jae-Sung had been aware of her since her 2nd week. He'd told himself it was routine, monitoring new staff, ensuring security. But he'd watched the security feeds more than necessary. Noticed the way she moved through rooms like water, efficient and graceful. The way she treated his mother's heirlooms like sacred objects. The quiet dignity in her spine, even when Soo Jin was tearing her apart with cruel words. Beautiful women threw themselves at him constantly. Socialites and models and rivals' daughters sent to seduce or spy. He felt nothing. They were games and angles and agendas. But this woman in a worn uniform, exhausted and proud, refusing to be invisible? She'd gotten under his skin without trying. He'd left expensive art supplies in her locker 3 months ago when he overheard her telling Rosa that her son loved to draw, but she couldn't afford proper materials. He'd watched her find them, watched her eyes fill with tears she wouldn't let fall, watched her whisper, "Thank you," to empty air like she knew they were from him. She hadn't asked for more, hadn't used it as leverage, had just whispered thank you and gone back to being invisible. That's when Jae-Sung had realized he was in trouble. And now she'd knelt beside him while he was dying and counted to 10 with her hand on his chest and looked at him like he was a person instead of a weapon. Now she'd given him something irreplaceable, his life, and asked for nothing in return. The car pulled through the estate gates. Jae-Sung's doctor had cleared him with stern warnings about rest and monitoring. The epinephrine had done its job, but his body would need time to recover. He didn't have time. He had investigators to coordinate, security to review, and a traitor to find. Someone had tried to kill him in his own home. That meant war. But first, he had to deal with Madison, Washington. "Bring her to my private study," he told Min-ho as they entered the house. "Quietly, I don't want my wife to know." Min-ho's expression didn't change, but Jae-Sung saw the calculation behind his cousin's eyes. "Are you sure that's wise? Soo-jin is already spreading rumors. If you're seen alone with the maid, then we'll deal with Soo-jin." Jae-Sung's voice carried the edge that made men obey without question. "Madison, Washington saved my life. The least I can do is thank her properly, without an audience." He walked through the house he'd lived in for 8 years, past the Korean art his mother had collected, past the koi pond his father had built before cancer took him, past the surveillance cameras that watched everything. His private study was on the 3rd floor, away from the main living areas. A room few people entered, a room where he could speak freely, where he could see if Madison, Washington was as real as she seemed, or if she was playing a deeper game than even he had anticipated. Madison followed the security guard through hallways she'd cleaned 100 times, but never really seen. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were sweating. She wiped them against her uniform skirt, hating the nervous gesture, hating that she couldn't control the fear twisting through her stomach. What did Jae-Sung Kim want? To fire her personally? To question her? She couldn't finish the thought. The guard stopped at a heavy wooden door carved with Korean characters she couldn't read. He knocked twice. A voice from inside, that voice deep and commanding and doing dangerous things to her pulse, said something in Korean. The guard opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Then he closed it behind her, leaving her alone with the man she'd saved. Jae-Sung's private study was all dark wood and leather, bookshelves lining 2 walls, a massive desk dominating the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the koi pond, now darkening with evening. The scent of cedar and something else, bergamot maybe, filled the air. Everything about the room screamed power and control and danger. Jae-Sung stood by the window, his back to her. He'd changed from the suit she'd administered the EpiPen through. Now he wore dark slacks and a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Even from behind, he commanded the space in a way that made the air feel heavier. "Madison, Washington." He turned, and the full weight of his attention hit her like a wave. "Thank you for coming." "You asked for me, Mr. Kim." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I work for you. You saved my life today." He moved toward her, not quickly, but with the deliberate grace of a predator. "That changes things." Madison's breath caught. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes from the ordeal, close enough to smell cedar and bergamot and something uniquely him, close enough that her body was acutely aware of his in ways that terrified her. "I did what anyone would do," she managed. "No." His eyes, dark and intense and seeing too much, locked onto hers. You did what no one else did. While my security team froze, while my wife screamed, while everyone panicked, you moved. You knew exactly what to do. Your hands didn't shake. My hands are shaking now, she admitted before she could stop herself. Something flickered in his expression, almost like a smile, but more dangerous. Mine did too. In the ambulance, when I realized how close I came. He paused. When I realized you risked your job, maybe your safety, to save me. I couldn't watch you die. Why not? The question was genuine. I'm not a good man, Madison. You've been here 6 months. You've seen things, heard things. You know what I am. She did. She'd seen men come to the house at midnight with blood on their sleeves, heard conversations in Korean that didn't need translation to understand violence, watched Jae-Sung Kim move through the world like a force of nature that destroyed anything in its path. But she'd also seen him spend 20 minutes on the phone speaking gently to his mother in Korean, seen him replace broken equipment in the kitchen without being asked, found art supplies in her locker because he'd overheard a conversation about her son. You're more than what you are, Madison said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Jae-Sung stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. Then he moved closer, just one step, but it closed the distance to almost nothing. Madison's pulse kicked into overdrive. The EpiPen you used, he said, his voice dropping lower. I'm having it replaced, and you'll be reimbursed for every prescription you've purchased for the last 6 years. That's not necessary. It is to me. He pulled a business card from his pocket, held it out. This is my private number, not my office, not my assistant, me. If anyone in this house gives you trouble, my wife, my security, anyone, you call me directly. Madison stared at the card like it was a live snake. Mr. Kim, I can't. You can, and you will. He reached out and took her hand, pressing the card into her palm. His fingers were warm, calloused in unexpected places, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. You gave me something irreplaceable today. Let me give you protection in return. She should pull away, should step back and remember her place, and refuse this dangerous intimacy. But his hand was still wrapped around hers, and she could feel his pulse beating against her wrist, and every rational thought in her head was drowning in the awareness of him. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Because you see me. His thumb moved across her knuckles in a gesture that felt deliberate, intentional. Because when I was dying, you looked at me like I was worth saving. No one has looked at me like that in a very long time. Then he released her hand and stepped back, putting professional distance between them. But Madison could still feel the ghost of his touch burning against her skin. Go home, Madison, he said. See your son. Take tomorrow off. Paid. I'll handle things here. She should leave, should run, should put as much distance between herself and this man as humanly possible. Instead, she heard herself say, Thank you, Mr. Kim. Jae-Sung. The correction was soft, but absolute. You saved my life. You can use my name. Madison walked out of that study on legs that barely held her, past security guards who watched with new intensity, down hallways that felt different now. Changed. The business card burned in her pocket like a brand. Outside, the Los Angeles winter night had settled in, cold and clear. Madison stood by her ancient Honda and stared up at the mansion, at the lit windows and surveillance cameras, and the world of power and danger and violence she'd just stepped deeper into. She'd saved a life today. But looking at that card with its single phone number, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that she'd also just condemned her own. Madison didn't sleep that night. She lay in her tiny apartment with Elijah breathing softly in the bed beside her. They shared because the place was too small for anything else, and stared at the ceiling. The business card sat on her nightstand. She'd looked at it 17 times. Hadn't called, wouldn't call. Couldn't afford to. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The art supplies weren't anonymous. I wanted you to know they were from me. J.K. Madison's heart stopped, started again too fast. How did he have her personal number? Then she remembered. Employee files, background checks. Jae-Sung Kim had access to everything about her life. She shouldn't respond. Every instinct screamed danger. Her fingers moved anyway. Thank you. Elijah loves them. 3 dots appeared immediately, like he'd been waiting for her response. Tell me about him. Madison sat up, careful not to wake her son. In the darkness of her apartment, so different from the mansion she cleaned, she found herself typing words she'd never shared with her employer. He's 5, loves superheroes and drawing. Had emergency surgery last year for appendicitis. That's why I needed this job, the hospital bills. She stopped, deleted the last part, sent the rest. And his father? Gone. Has been since I told him I was pregnant. The dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before his response came. His loss. Our gain. Our. The word did something dangerous to her chest. Madison set the phone down and forced herself not to respond again. This was her boss. This was Jae-Sung Kim. This was a man whose world would destroy her if she let it. But when sleep finally came, she dreamed of cedar and bergamot and hands that didn't shake. The next morning, Madison found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside, a check for $15, $0 with a note in sharp, precise handwriting. 6 years of EpiPens at $300 per prescription, replaced twice yearly. Plus the one you used. The money is yours, no strings. You saved my life. This is the minimum I owe you. J.K. Madison's knees went weak. $15,000. That would cover 3 months of rent. Elijah's follow-up appointments. The most pressing hospital bills. It would give her breathing room she hadn't had in 5 years. It would also make her dependent on Jae-Sung Kim's generosity. Make her beholden. Make her something other than an employee. She deposited the check anyway, because her son needed to eat, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. When Madison returned to work 2 days later, after the mandated day off she'd spent at a park with Elijah trying to feel normal, everything had shifted. The other staff members looked at her differently, some with respect, some with suspicion. Rosa pulled her aside in the kitchen with worry written across her weathered face. Soo Jin is furious, Rosa whispered. She tried to fire you. Mr. Kim overruled her. In front of the whole household staff. Miha, she's never been publicly contradicted before. Madison's stomach clenched. That makes me a target. That makes you protected. Rosa squeezed her hand. But be careful. Protected and safe aren't the same thing. Madison was polishing silver in the dining room that afternoon when Jae-Sung found her. She didn't hear him approach. He moved too quietly for a man his size, but suddenly the air in the room changed, compressed, heated. Madison. His voice made her pulse jump traitorously. She turned. He stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, hands in his pockets, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Mr. Kim. She set down the silver carefully, wiping her hands on her apron. I told you to use my name. That wouldn't be appropriate, sir. He moved into the room, closing the distance between them with measured steps. Madison's breath caught. He stopped at the opposite side of the dining table, 8 feet of mahogany between them, but it felt like nothing. Did you receive my gift? He asked. I did. It was too much. It wasn't enough. His eyes held hers, dark and unreadable. You gave me my life back. 15,000 doesn't begin to cover that debt. I don't want you in my debt. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Madison couldn't quite parse. What did she want? To keep her job? To keep her son safe? To stop dreaming about a man who lived in a world of violence and power and danger that would swallow her whole. To stop noticing the way his presence made every nerve ending in her body wake up and pay attention. "I want to do my job," she said finally. "I want to be invisible again." Something flickered across his face, almost like pain. "You were never invisible to me." The words hit her like a physical blow. Before she could respond, before she could process what that meant, his phone buzzed. Jae-Sung pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. The man who'd been looking at her like she mattered disappeared behind cold calculation. "I have to go," he said. "But Madison, you can't be invisible anymore, not after what happened, so stop trying." Then he was gone, leaving her with silver that needed polishing and a heart that was beating too fast. Over the next 2 weeks, Jae-Sung appeared in whatever room Madison was cleaning with a frequency that couldn't be coincidence. In the library while she dusted books, asking what she liked to read. In the kitchen while she helped Rosa prep dinner, commenting on the food his mother used to make. In the hallway while she mopped floors, telling her the history of paintings she passed every day without really seeing. Each conversation was brief, professional on the surface, but underneath ran a current of something Madison couldn't name and didn't want to acknowledge. He asked about Elijah constantly, what he liked to eat, what made him laugh, whether he was doing better after his surgery. Madison found herself answering, sharing pieces of her life she'd kept carefully hidden for 6 months. And every time Jae-Sung looked at her, really looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, Madison felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "This is dangerous," she told Rosa one evening as they cleaned up after a dinner party. "He's paying too much attention to me." "Maybe," Rosa handed her a stack of plates. "Or maybe he sees what I saw when I brought you here, that you're different, special. I'm a maid with a 5-year-old and debt I'll never pay off. There's nothing special about me." "That's what your ex told you, isn't it?" Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. "That you weren't worth anything. That you should be grateful for the crumbs he gave you. That's why you stayed until he put you in the hospital." Madison's hands stilled on the dishes. She rarely talked about Marcus. About the 3 years she'd spent believing she deserved his anger. About the night he'd broken 2 of her ribs and she'd finally run. "Mr. Kim isn't Marcus," Rosa continued. "I've worked for this family for 15 years. I've seen Jae-Sung with many women. He's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" "Like you're water, and he's been dying of thirst." That night, Madison was leaving through the service entrance when she found Jae-Sung leaning against her car. Her ancient, rusting Honda looked ridiculous next to his armored town car parked nearby. He looked ridiculous standing there in a suit that cost thousands, waiting for a maid. "Mr. Kim," Madison's heart was already racing. "Is something wrong?" "Your car." He pushed off the hood. "It's not safe. It runs. Barely." He moved closer. Madison's back pressed against the driver's side door. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell cedar and bergamot, close enough to see the late hour shadowed under his eyes. "The brake lights are out. The tires are bald. If you got in an accident—" "I can't afford to fix it," Madison interrupted. "I can barely afford the insurance." "Then let me—" "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "You already gave me $15,000. I can't take more. I won't be bought." His jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to buy you." "Then what are you trying to do?" She was angry now, months of tension and fear and unwanted attraction boiling over. "Why are you everywhere I am? Why do you ask about my son? Why do you look at me like—" She cut herself off. "Like what?" His voice dropped dangerously low. He moved closer, eliminating another foot of space. Now she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the pulse beating in his throat. "Say it, Madison." "Like I matter," she whispered. "Like I'm more than what I am." "You are more than what you are." He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to move away. She didn't. Couldn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was feather-light and sent electricity racing down her spine. You're the woman who saved my life, who counts to 10 with steady hands while everyone else falls apart, who carries an EpiPen because trauma taught you to be prepared, who works 3 jobs for a son who doesn't know how lucky he is to have you. Madison's breath caught. His hand was still near her face, not quite touching but close enough that she felt the ghost of contact. You're the woman I can't stop thinking about, Jae-Sung continued, his voice rough. The one I make excuses to see. The one who's gotten under my skin without even trying. So yes, Madison, you matter. You matter more than you should. She should step away. Should remember that he was her boss and a criminal and everything her mother taught her to avoid. Should remember that his world was violence and power and danger. Should remember that women like her didn't get men like him. But his hand was cupping her face now, thumb tracing her cheekbone, and every rational thought in her head was drowning in the awareness of him. This can't happen, she managed. I know. You're married. Not for much longer. His eyes were molten dark. That marriage has been dead for years. We stay together for appearance, for business, but I'm ending it. The paperwork is already started. Your wife hates me. My wife hates everyone who threatens her position. You terrify her because you're real. Because you see me as a person instead of an asset. I'm a maid. You're... Stop. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her gently. Stop telling me all the reasons this can't work. I know them all. I've listed them to myself 1,000 times. It doesn't change anything. What do you want from me? Madison's voice broke. Everything, he said simply. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give. Then his phone rang, sharp and insistent in the quiet parking area. Jae-Sung closed his eyes, his jaw clenching with frustration. He pulled back, his hands dropping away from her face, leaving her skin cold where he'd touched. I have to go, he said, checking the screen. But Madison, think about what I said. Think about what you want. Not what you think you deserve, what you actually want. He walked to his town car, his security detail materializing from the shadows. Madison watched him leave, her face still burning where he'd touched her, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did she want? She wanted to stop being afraid, wanted to give Elijah a life that wasn't defined by poverty and debt, wanted to feel safe for the first time since her mother died, wanted to know what it felt like to be seen, really seen, by someone who looked at her like Jae-Sung Kim did. But wanting things was dangerous. Wanting things got you hurt. Madison drove home in her dying Honda with bald tires and broken brake lights and tried to convince herself she wasn't already in too deep. While Madison lay awake that night staring at her ceiling, Jae-Sung sat in his home office reviewing security footage. Not from the day of the poisoning. His team had already scrubbed every frame of that. This was footage from the last 6 months. Madison moving through rooms with unconscious grace. Madison speaking softly to Rosa in the kitchen. Madison's face when she found the art supplies. Tears she wouldn't let fall shining in her eyes. Madison looking at him when she thought he wasn't watching, something hungry and terrified warring in her expression. You're obsessed. Minho's voice cut through the darkness. His cousin stood in the doorway, arms crossed. This is dangerous, Jae-Sung. Someone tried to kill me in my own home. Everything is dangerous. I'm not talking about the poisoning. I'm talking about the maid. Minho moved into the room, his face unreadable. You're spending too much time with her. People are noticing. Soo-jin is noticing. I don't care what Soo-jin notices. The divorce papers are filed. Papers take months to finalize, and in the meantime, you're making that woman a target. Minho's voice was careful. If our enemies think she matters to you, she saved my life. And you've repaid her, the check, the protection, But this? Minho gestured at the security feeds, still showing Madison's image. This is something else. This is you getting emotionally involved. You don't do emotions, Jae-Sung. You've built an empire by not feeling anything. Don't let one woman with pretty eyes undo that. Jae-Sung closed the laptop with controlled force. You're dismissed. I'm your cousin, your blood. I'm trying to protect you. Then find whoever tried to kill me. That's how you protect me. Minho stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Then he nodded and left. Jae-Sung sat in the darkness and thought about Madison Washington, about the way she'd looked at him in the parking lot, wanting and afraid and determined not to want, about the softness of her skin under his fingers, about the hitch in her breath when he'd called her beautiful without using the word. He'd meant what he said. He wanted everything from her, her trust, her laughter, her body, her future. But first, he had to end a marriage that should have ended years ago, had to eliminate the threat that had tried to kill him, had to make his world safe enough that Madison and her son could exist in it without becoming targets, had to prove to her that he was worth the risk. Jae-Sung pulled up the security feed one more time, watched Madison walk through his house like she owned it, watched her smile at something Rosa said, watched her transform from invisible to essential without even realizing it. Mine, he said to the empty room. You just don't know it yet. 3 days later, Madison was organizing the library when Soo-jin found her. Jae-Sung's almost ex-wife stood in the doorway in a cream Chanel suit, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists, face perfectly made up to hide the cracks beneath. So you're the one, Soo-jin said in English, her accent thicker than usual. The one he can't stop talking about, the one he watches on security cameras, the one who's ruining everything. Madison's heart kicked into overdrive. She set down the books she'd been shelving carefully. Mrs. Kim, I'm just doing my job. Liar. Soo-jin moved into the room, her heels clicking against hardwood. You're doing much more than your job. You're seducing my husband. I would never. Don't insult my intelligence. Soo-jin's perfect mask cracked, showing fury beneath. I've seen the way he looks at you, the way he talks about you. He's ending our marriage. Did you know that? 8 years together? And he's throwing it away for a maid. Madison's stomach dropped. She'd known the divorce was started. But hearing it from Soo-jin, hearing the venom and pain and rage, made it real in a way that terrified her. I didn't ask for any of this, Madison said quietly. You didn't have to ask. You just had to exist. Soo-jin was close now, invading Madison's space. You think this will end well for you? You think a man like Jae-Sung will really choose someone like you? You're a novelty, a charity case, something exotic to entertain him until he gets bored. Each word landed like a blow, hit every insecurity Madison had been nursing for weeks. When he's done with you, Soo-jin continued, her voice dropping to something cruel and intimate, he'll throw you away like trash, and you'll be left with nothing, no job, no reputation, just a bastard son and debt you'll die buried under. Madison's hand moved before thought caught up. The slap cracked across Soo-jin's face, snapping her head to the side. For one frozen moment, both women stared at each other in shock. Then Soo-jin smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Madison had ever seen. Thank you, Soo-jin said softly, touching her reddening cheek. Now I have witnesses. Now I have cause. She raised her voice, theatrical and perfect. Security, this woman attacked me. 2 guards appeared within seconds. Madison's blood turned to ice. She assaulted me, Soo-jin announced, slapped me across the face, unprovoked. I want her arrested. I want her charged. I want her destroyed. No, Madison started. I saw the whole thing. Minho Park materialized from nowhere, his face grave. Mrs. Kim is correct. Madison Washington struck her. That's assault. Madison's world tilted. This was it. She'd just destroyed everything for 5 seconds of rage. She'd lose her job. potentially face charges. Lose custody of Elijah while she couldn't provide for him, all because she'd let Soo-jin get under her skin. "Call the police," Soo-jin ordered, triumph bright in her eyes. Then Jae-sung's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "No one is calling anyone." He stood in the library doorway, radiating cold fury. Every person in the room went still. Madison's heart stuttered at the sight of him, at the danger and power and protection he represented. "She struck me," Soo-jin pointed at her reddening cheek. "Your cousin witnessed it." "Did he?" Jae-sung's eyes cut to Min-ho. "Did you see what led to that slap? What was said before Madison reacted?" Min-ho's expression didn't change. "No, I only saw the assault." Convenient. Jae-sung moved into the room, stopped beside Madison. His hand brushed hers, brief, hidden from view, but grounding. "Madison, what did my wife say to you?" Madison's throat was tight. She wouldn't cry, wouldn't give Soo-jin the satisfaction. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She called my son a bastard." The words came out flat. "Said you'd throw me away like trash when you got bored. That I was nothing." Jae-sung's jaw clenched. He turned to Soo-jin slowly. "You attacked her child. I stated facts. You provoked her intentionally, knowing she would react, knowing Min-ho was watching." His voice was deadly calm. This was a setup to get Madison fired, to hurt me through her. "You're paranoid," Soo-jin snapped, "and blind. She's using you. Get out." The words were quiet, but carried enough force to make everyone flinch. "Out of this library, out of this house. I want you gone by tonight." Soo-jin paled. "This is my home. This is my home, purchased with my money. And as of yesterday, the divorce papers were served. You have no legal right to be here." Jae-sung's hand found Madison's again, this time holding openly. "You insulted the woman who saved my life, attacked her child. That's unforgivable." "You're choosing her over me?" Soo-jin's voice climbed. "A maid over your wife?" "I'm choosing someone real over someone who married me for status and access to my accounts." Jae-sung's voice was ice. "You have 2 hours. Take your things and go. Your lawyers will handle the rest." Soo-jin stared at him, at Madison, at their joined hands. Then she laughed, high and brittle and broken. "You'll regret this," she said. "Both of you. You have no idea what you've started." She walked out, heels clicking, spine straight despite the fury and humiliation rolling off her in waves. The guards dispersed. Min-ho lingered, his eyes on Madison thoughtful and unreadable, before he too left, leaving Madison alone with Jae-sung, his hand still wrapped around hers. "I'm sorry," Madison whispered. "I shouldn't have hit her. She called Elijah." "Don't apologize." Jae-sung turned to face her fully, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Don't ever apologize for defending your son. She baited you on purpose, knew exactly what to say to make you react. I might have charges pressed. You won't. I'll make sure of it." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But Madison, you need to understand something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Soo-jin won't go quietly. She'll attack you any way she can. And now that she knows you matter to me..." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Maybe I should quit," Madison said, "before this gets more complicated." "It's already complicated. Quitting won't change that." His eyes burned into hers. "And I don't want you to quit. I want you here. I want you safe. He cut himself off, but Madison saw it in his face, saw what he wanted written in every line of tension in his body. He wanted her, all of her, and God help her, she wanted him too. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know. You're my boss. Not for much longer. I'm having Rosa train her replacement. When she's ready, you'll work directly for me. Private assistant, Better pay, better hours, a position where no one can question why I spend time with you. Madison's breath caught. You've thought about this. I've thought about everything. Your safety, your son's future. How to make this work without destroying you. His hand slipped from her face to her neck, thumb resting against her racing pulse. But I need to know you want this too. That you're willing to risk the complicated, the dangerous, the impossible. What did she want? The question he'd asked her days ago. Madison looked at Jae-Sung Kim, at the danger and power and protection he represented, at the man who'd sent her $15,000 with no strings, who asked about her son like he mattered, who touched her like she was precious, at the man whose world would either save her or destroy her, and she couldn't tell which. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. That means you understand the stakes. He smiled then, small and genuine. But are you willing to be terrified with me? Madison thought about Elijah, about debt and poverty and invisibility, about spending her whole life being told she wasn't worth anything, about the way Jae-Sung looked at her like she was water and he was dying of thirst. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. His smile widened. Then hold on, Madison Washington, because everything is about to change. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is different. What you just saw is only the beginning. What comes next will change everything. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Hit like if you're rooting for Madison and want to see her win. And tell me in the comments, do you think she can escape this? I want to know your thoughts. From marble towers to humble streets, every click helps these stories reach those who need to hear them. Now, let's find out what happens when everything falls apart. The attack came at 3 a.m. Madison woke to the sound of gunfire and Elijah screaming. Instinct took over. She grabbed her son from the bed and dove into the bathroom, slamming the door. Her hands shook as she locked it, pulled out her phone, dialed Jae-Sung's number. Madison! His voice was sharp, alert. They're here, shooting. I have Elijah in the bathroom. Stay there. Don't open the door for anyone except me. I'm coming. More gunfire crackled through the phone. Fuck. They hit multiple entry points. Madison, listen to me carefully. There's a panel under the sink. Pull it. There's a gun inside. Do you know how to use one? No. Safety's already off. Point and shoot if anyone comes through that door who isn't me. Understand? Jae-Sung, I'm not losing you, either of you. Hold on. The call ended. Madison pulled Elijah against her chest, feeling his small body tremble. She found the panel, the gun. The metal was cold and heavy in her hands. She'd never held a weapon before, never wanted to, but for Elijah, for survival, she'd do anything. Outside the bathroom, chaos erupted. Shouts in Korean and Chinese, more gunfire, glass shattering, men screaming. Then silence, terrible, stretching silence. Elijah buried his face in her neck. Mama, I'm scared. I know, baby, I know, but Mr. Jae-Sung is coming. He's going to protect us. She hoped she wasn't lying. Footsteps approached the bathroom, slow, deliberate. Madison raised the gun with shaking hands, pointing it at the door. Her finger found the trigger. Every muscle in her body tensed. Madison. Jae-Sung's voice, rough and strained. It's me. Open the door. She nearly sobbed with relief. Madison set the gun down carefully and unlocked the door. Jae-Sung stood there with blood on his shirt. She couldn't tell if it was his, and eyes wild with barely controlled violence. Behind him, bodies littered the floor. His security team moved through the apartment, checking corners, securing the space. Are you hurt? His hands were on her immediately, checking for injuries, his touch frantic, despite the steadiness of his voice. We're fine. Scared, but fine. Madison pulled back to look at him. You're bleeding. Not my blood. He knelt in front of Elijah, who was still clinging to Madison. Hey, buddy, you okay? Elijah nodded, eyes huge. You came. You said you'd protect us, and you came. Always. Jae-Sung's voice was fierce. I will always come for you, both of you. He stood, pulling Madison and Elijah against him. But we need to move, now. This location is compromised. How did they find us? Madison asked as Jae-Sung guided them through the apartment, carefully steering Elijah's eyes away from the bodies. You said this place was secret. It was. Jae-Sung's jaw clenched. Which means someone told them, someone inside my organization. They made it to the parking garage where 3 armored vehicles waited, engines running. Jae-Sung put Madison and Elijah in the middle car, security swarming around them. Then they were moving, racing through Los Angeles streets at dangerous speeds. Where are we going? Madison asked. The estate. Ironically, it's the safest place now. I've tripled security, brought in specialists from Seoul. No one gets in or out without my explicit approval. His phone buzzed constantly. He answered in rapid Korean, giving orders that sounded like declarations of war. They reached the Kim estate as dawn broke over Los Angeles. The mansion was lit up like a fortress, armed guards at every entrance, surveillance active on every camera. Jae-Sung carried a sleeping Elijah. The boy had crashed from adrenaline, while Madison followed on legs that barely held her. He took them to his private wing, the master bedroom she'd never entered before. Set Elijah gently on the massive bed and covered him with blankets. Then he turned to Madison with eyes that held barely leashed fury. I'm ending this today, he said quietly. Minho just texted asking if we were safe. He's the only one outside my inner security team who knew about that safe house location. His hands clenched. My cousin, my blood. He's been selling me out to the triad since the beginning. Madison's breath caught. You're sure? I've suspected for weeks. Now I'm certain. He moved to the window overlooking the koi pond, where dawn painted the water gold. My IT team traced the leak to his devices, found communications with triad leadership, evidence of payments. He orchestrated the poisoning, the warehouse attacks. Last night. His voice dropped to something deadly. He sold out his own family for money and power. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment I suspected. End him. Jae-Sung turned to face her. In my world, betrayal has only one punishment. He knows that. He chose his path anyway. Madison should have felt horror, should have recoiled from the violence he was describing so calmly. But all she felt was cold fury that someone had tried to kill her son, that this betrayal had put Elijah in danger. I want to be there, she said. Jae-Sung's eyes widened slightly. Madison. He threatened my son, gave our location to people who wanted us dead. I want to see him face consequence. Her voice was steel. I want him to know that threatening Elijah was the worst mistake he ever made. Something shifted in Jae-Sung's expression. Pride, maybe. Dark satisfaction. You're sure? Completely. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. You're incredible. You know that? Terrifying and incredible. His lips found hers in a kiss that was possessive and grateful. After this is done, after the threat is eliminated and you're safe, we're going to talk about our future, about making this permanent, about building something real. I know. Madison's hands fisted in his shirt. But first, we end this. Minho arrived at the estate 2 hours later, summoned by Jae-Sung for an emergency meeting. He walked into the study where Jae-Sung waited with Madison beside him and 3 of his most trusted guards blocking the exits. What's this about? Minho's eyes flicked between them, calculating. Betrayal. Jae-Sung's voice was ice. Yours, specifically. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Minho's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. The poisoning, the warehouse attacks, selling our safe house location to the triad. Jae-Sung pulled up his phone, showed evidence on the screen. Your communications, your payments, all of it traced back to you. For a long moment, Minho said nothing. Then he laughed, bitter and resigned. You always were too smart for your own good. Why? The question was raw. We're family, blood. I trusted you with everything. That's why. Minho's facade cracked, showing rage beneath. You trusted me with everything except real power. I was always second, always in your shadow. Your father chose you as heir even though I'm older, smarter, more ruthless. He gestured at Madison. And then you get soft over a maid. Let feelings cloud your judgment, prove you're not fit to lead. So you tried to kill me. I tried to save the family business from a leader who was becoming weak. The triad offered partnership, real power, a chance to finally step out of your shadow. Minho's eyes were cold. If you died from the poisoning, I would have taken over, fixed your mistakes, built something stronger. By selling out to our enemies? Jae-Sung's voice was deadly calm. By putting innocent people in danger? Collateral damage. That woman and her bastard son were leverage. Jae-Sung moved before Minho could finish. His fist connected with his cousin's jaw with brutal force, sending him crashing into the desk. The guards moved forward, pinning Minho as he tried to rise. You don't speak about them, Jae-Sung said, voice vibrating with controlled rage. You don't even think about them. They're under my protection, which means they're untouchable. Minho spat blood. You've already lost. The triad knows you're weak now, knows you care about her. They'll never stop coming. Then I'll keep killing them until they learn. Jae-Sung pulled a gun from his desk drawer. Madison's breath caught. She'd known this moment was coming, but seeing it, seeing cold calculation in Jae-Sung's eyes, made it real. Family is everything, Jae-Sung said quietly. You taught me that. My father taught me that. And you betrayed that principle for money and ego. He chambered around. In our world, betrayal has one punishment. You knew that when you made your choice. Jae-Sung? Minho's facade cracked completely, showing fear beneath. We're blood. You can't. I can, and I will. He raised the gun. For every warehouse worker you got killed, for every member of our organization you sold out, for threatening Madison and Elijah. His finger moved to the trigger. This is justice. Wait. Madison's voice cut through the tension. Jae-Sung paused, eyes cutting to her. She moved forward, standing beside him, looked Minho in the eyes. I want him to know that he failed, that threatening my son didn't make Jae-Sung weak. It made him more dangerous. That love isn't a liability. It's armor. She turned to Jae-Sung. He doesn't deserve a quick death. Let him face the families of the people he got killed. Let him live knowing he destroyed everything for nothing. Jae-Sung stared at her, then slowly lowered the gun. You're right. He turned to his guards. Take him to the warehouse. Let our people know what he did. Let them decide his punishment. Then deliver what's left to the triad as a message. This is what happens to anyone who threatens my family. Minho's scream was cut off as the guards dragged him from the room. The door closed, leaving Madison and Jae-Sung alone in the sudden silence. Thank you, he said quietly, for stopping me, for being the conscience I don't have. You have one. You just needed permission to use it. Madison moved into his arms. Is it over? Really over? The triad will receive Minho's body tomorrow with a message. Any further attacks mean all-out war. They're stretched thin. They won't risk it. He held her close. It's over, Madison. You're safe. Elijah is safe. We're all safe. She felt his hands trembling against her back, felt the weight of what he'd almost done, what he'd been prepared to do to protect her. This man who commanded empires and killed without hesitation was shaking because she and Elijah had been in danger. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy. But I love you, Jae-Sung Kim. He pulled back to look at her, eyes bright with emotion she'd never seen in him before. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you. I love you. I love... He kissed her, deep and desperate and claiming, his hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head to take the kiss deeper. Madison melted into him, pouring months of fear and want and need into contact. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I love you," Jae-Sung said, voice rough. "I've been falling for you since the day you knelt beside me dying and counted to 10. Since you whispered thank you to empty air over art supplies. Since you slapped my wife for insulting your son." He framed her face with both hands. "I love your strength, your courage, the way you see me as a person instead of a weapon, the way you make me want to be better than what I am. You're already better than what you think you are, only because of you." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. "Marry me." Madison's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me. Not today, not tomorrow, when the divorce is finalized and you're ready. But marry me, Madison. Let me give Elijah my name and protection. Let me build a life with you, a real one." His eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." Tears burned her eyes. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want a life with you. Yes, to all of it." She laughed through tears. "I'm still terrified, still don't know how to navigate your world, but I want to try, with you." Jae-Sung picked her up and spun her around, laughing, a sound so rare and genuine it made her heart ache. When he set her down, his kiss was different, softer, full of promise. "We should check on Elijah," Madison said breathlessly. "In a minute." His forehead rested against hers. "Let me hold you. Let me process that you just agreed to be mine forever, that I get to keep you." They stood in that study wrapped in each other as morning light filled the room. Outside, guards patrolled and surveillance monitored, and the machinery of protection worked tirelessly. But inside this moment, there was only them. Only the woman who'd saved a life and the man who'd been saved. Only love that shouldn't have worked, but did. Only a future that was impossible and inevitable all at once. And there it is. Justice served. Love earned. If this story touched your heart, if you smiled when Madison finally had her moment, I need your support. Subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs this message. That dignity has no price. That true love exists. That everyone deserves to be seen. Leave a comment with your favorite moment. Was it when Madison stood up to Minho? When Jae-Sung proposed? Or that first kiss you waited so long to see? I read every comment. These stories exist because of you. Your click, your comment, your share. Each one matters. Each one brings more stories of invisible people who refuse to disappear. Now, let me show you what happened 6 months later. 1 year later, Madison stood in front of a full-length mirror wearing a dress that blended two worlds. The top was traditional Korean hanbok silk in deep crimson, the color of good fortune and joy. The skirt flowed into ivory lace that her grandmother would have recognized, would have loved. Elijah sat on the bed behind her in a miniature suit, swinging his legs and chattering about his new Korean name. "Jae-Sung says when you marry him, I get to be Elijah Kim," her son announced proudly. "That's my new name, Elijah James Kim. The adoption papers came yesterday. I signed them with my best handwriting." Madison's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall and ruin her makeup. 6 months of court proceedings, 6 months of background checks and home visits and interviews, 6 months of Jae-Sung fighting tooth and nail to legally make Elijah his son. And yesterday, the judge had signed the final papers. Elijah Kim, protected by one of the most powerful names on the West Coast, safe in a way Madison had never been able to provide alone. "You look beautiful, Mama." Elijah came to stand beside her, small and solemn. "Jae-Sung is going to cry when he sees you. He cries a lot now, happy crying. He says you and me make him soft." Madison laughed, wiping her eyes carefully. "We do, don't we?" Rosa appeared in the doorway, resplendent in her own hanbok, tears already streaming. "Mija, it's time. Everyone's waiting." The ceremony took place in the koi pond garden where Madison had once cleaned as invisible staff. Now she walked down an aisle lined with paper lanterns, Korean and American designs intermingled, while a string quartet played a fusion of traditional wedding marches. On one side sat Jae-Sung's family and business associates. On the other, her small circle, her babysitter Mrs. Chen, the nurses who'd helped with Elijah's surgery, Rosa, who'd given her this chance. Two worlds meeting, merging, becoming one. And at the end of the aisle stood Jae-Sung Kim in a traditional hanbok that made him look like the warrior kings his ancestors had been. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she appeared, and just like Elijah predicted, tears streaked his face. He didn't bother wiping them away, just watched her approach with everything he felt written across his expression: love, gratitude, wonder, forever. Elijah walked her down the aisle, his small hand in hers, taking the job seriously. When they reached Jae-Sung, her son looked up at the man who'd become his father in every way that mattered. "I'm giving you my mama," Elijah said solemnly, "but you have to promise to make her happy forever." "I promise." Jae-Sung knelt, taking both their hands. "I promise to make both of you happy, to protect you, to love you, for all my days." "Okay." Elijah nodded seriously. "Then you can marry her." Laughter rippled through the guests. The officiant, a Korean elder who'd known Jae-Sung's father, began the ceremony in both Korean and English. They exchanged vows that Madison had memorized phonetically, stumbling through Korean promises while Jae-Sung held her hands and whispered corrections with infinite patience. Then they exchanged traditional bows, to the heavens, to ancestors, to each other, before sealing everything with a kiss that made the guests cheer. "Mrs. Kim," Jae-Sung whispered against her lips, "finally mine in every way that matters." "Finally yours," Madison agreed, "though I have been for a year." "I know, but now the world knows it too." The reception was a blur of congratulations and food from both cultures. Korean dishes his mother had taught the chef to make, Southern comfort food Madison had requested to honor her own mother's memory, dancing that lasted until the paper lanterns glowed against the night sky, toasts that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. And through it all, Jae-Sung never let Madison out of his sight. His hand found hers constantly. His eyes tracked her across the garden. When she danced with Elijah, their son, legally and forever, Jae-Sung watched with such open emotion that Rosa had to hand him another handkerchief. "You've made him human again," Jae-Sung's mother said, appearing beside Madison during a quiet moment. The older woman had been cold during their first meetings, protective of her son, suspicious of Madison's motives. But time and truth had won her over. "I watched him build walls after his father died, watched him become ice. I thought I'd lost the boy I raised." She squeezed Madison's hand. "Thank you for bringing him back." "He brought himself back," Madison said. "I just gave him a reason." 3 years later, Madison stood in that same koi pond garden watching Elijah, now 9 and thriving, show his 3-year-old twin sisters how to feed the fish. The girls, Mia and Grace, had their father's dark eyes and their mother's smile. They adored their big brother with single-minded devotion. "Appa, fish eating my fingers," Mia shrieked in Korean. "Not eating, nibbling," Elijah corrected in English, then repeated it in Korean for his sisters. "Appa says it tickles, not hurts." Madison's hand rested on her growing belly, 4 months along with the son Jae-Sung had been hoping for since the twins arrived. Her life had transformed so completely that sometimes she had to stop and remember the woman she'd been. The maid drowning in debt and invisibility. The single mother terrified of losing everything. That woman felt like a stranger now. "What are you thinking about?" Jae-Sung's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. His voice was warm against her ear. "How far we've come. How different everything is. Better or worse? Better So much better I'm almost afraid to believe it's real. It's real. He turned her to face him. 4 years since she'd saved his life, and he still looked at her like she was the answer to every question. You're real. Our children are real. This life we built together is real. I love you, Madison said, like she did every day, like she'd never tire of saying, I love you. He kissed her softly. My savior, my wife, my everything. Elijah called out in Korean, something about the fish being hungry, and Jae-Sung laughed, the sound free and genuine and frequent now. They walked hand in hand to join their children, to feed koi fish and speak in 2 languages and exist in a world that had once seemed impossible. The EpiPen that saved a life had become the catalyst that built a family. The maid who'd been invisible had become the queen of an empire, and the man who'd convinced himself he couldn't feel anything had become a husband and father who felt everything. Some love stories were safe and simple. This one had been dangerous and complicated and forged in fire. But standing in that garden, surrounded by children's laughter and koi pond ripples and the man whose life she'd saved, Madison wouldn't have changed a single moment. Because invisible people don't stay invisible forever. Sometimes they find someone who sees them, really sees them, and refuses to look away. Sometimes they save a life. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, that life saves them right back.